Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another episode of First Impressions, the video series where I discuss films, either ones on their theatrical run, or ones I've been meaning to watch for a while. Today's is one of the latter. It's a film I've been meaning to watch ever since it came out last year. I've been searching for a way to watch it, and then recently I found out it was actually finally released on home video here in the good old US. I actually found out yesterday as I record this video. It's a Saturday, so Friday. It kind of makes a post my brother made make a little bit more sense, because I was thinking, how's he watching the movie? Is it on video on demand? Nope, it's on video. The film, of course, is Shin Godzilla, the latest Godzilla film and the first made by Toho since Godzilla Final Wars. Now, when I heard that Toho was making another Godzilla film in the wake of Legendary Pictures' 2014 film with Bryan Cranston and Aaron Taylor Johnson, I was excited. I'm like, ooh. Sadly, I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters, and I forget why. Maybe it was because it was released out here when I couldn't drive yet, or I had other stuff to do that day, or I just was being lazy. Either way, I'm kicking myself now. Because I watched the film last night, and let's just say I love it. I don't know if I can go as far as saying that I like it more than Legendary's film, but I'm leaning in that direction. Mainly because, even though it does play the whole thing that you only see Godzilla in bursts, it doesn't do the whole thing where it pulls away. You're like, oh, it's going to be a monster fight. Well, that's bullshit. Mainly because since he's the only monster in the movie, you don't have to worry about that. And whenever Godzilla is actually messing stuff up, he's messing stuff up. Just a quick little thing. If you hear noise in the background, that's the budgies. I guess I'm talking about a dinosaur. So, the still existing dinos want to talk. Now, if the information I found is accurate, the film was made when you convert yen to the American dollar for about 15 million, and I'm going to guess it's the worldwide figure. It made about 77 million theatrically, which is a pretty good budget to gross ratio. Definitely going to earn a sequel, which from what I hear, Toho's not going to release one until after 2020, and I think I know why, because of Legendary's films. Maybe there's something in the contract somewhere. Or maybe they want to wait until after the next few films before they release another one. They don't want to rush the film, which is, I think, a smart idea for them. I mean, if you start rushing the sequels out like that, they're not going to be as good. I mean, Disney and Marvel are able to get away with it because all the different films they write and direct and release are done by different teams, so they have a couple years in between each film, so there's not burnout. The thing about this film that stands out the most among all the Godzilla films made by Toho is this is the first time we have a full-on reboot. And by that I mean no continuity carried over. Because every other time they've done a reboot, there's at least been some continuity shared. I mean, 84 was a sequel to the original film. Most of the Millennium films that were standalone reboots at least kept the continuity of the original film somewhat. A couple had like minor changes, but that film was always still in continuity. For this film, this is the first time ever that the world has seen Godzilla. And I think there's two reasons why they went this route. One, is that's the route that Legendary Pictures went. So it's a response to that. But this is more of a friendly jab. It's not like with the first American Godzilla film where it took the concept of Godzilla, and just, at least from a character perspective, butchered it. Because even though the first American Godzilla film I can watch and enjoy, its biggest flaw is that the Godzilla in that film is not like Godzilla. First flaw, military is not supposed to kill him. That's what I'm going to say about it in this. Whereas this one is more like a friendly jab, whereas Godzilla 2000 was more like, is, in the words of Soul Monster, let me school you, son. Whereas the original film was an allegory about the use of nuclear weapons back then, especially since this is Japan in the decade following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Legendary film took it and made it an allegory more for man versus nature. This one is more in line with the original one, because there is still some of that nuclear weapons allegory in there. It's in the background. It's more an allegory about natural disasters such as the tsunami from 2011. Because I read that they threw some of that in, and watching the film, it's like, yep, I see it. And part of it connects to some mild satire involving bureaucracy and how you have to work in situations like this. It's very, very subtle satire, but if you watch it, you can notice it. It's not like Monty Python level where it's silly. It's subtle and very realistic, where you're like, oh, I see what they're poking fun at. And I'd say the Godzilla film does that. It's a breath of fresh... For the Japanese Godzilla films, it's a breath of fresh air, because Most of the other ones, it was rinse repeat, giant monster fight, Godzilla coming back, battling. I'd say this is probably the most original of the Japanese Godzilla films since maybe '84, but even that, oh, the only main thing original about that is some of the character traits he introduced to Godzilla and the fact he went back to his darker self. 2000 and all, most of the Millennium series were rinse repeat ones, even Final Wars. Well, I guess you could say the first American one, but that's in a different category. And maybe versus King Ghidorah because of the whole time travel aspect. It's the first time they threw something like that into it. I mean, we've had aliens before, but never something involving time travel. Another thing it throws in is that Godzilla evolves throughout the course of the film. We see him first in this weird form that's green that has like Google eye things. Then we see him in a little transitional form, and then finally we see him in that form, the form that we saw the picture of during the whole our marketing campaign and the lead up to the film, where he looks like he actually was through a nuclear blast, including his skin. And another first for this film is this is the first Japanese Godzilla film where Godzilla is brought to life entirely through CGI. I mean, previous films in the Millennium series, there'd been brief scenes like seeing a Godzilla swimming here and there, and of course his atomic breath was done in the computer, but first time. And it's a varying results. There's a lot of scenes throughout the movie that look good, that almost look like it could be someone in a suit. Then there's a couple shots here and there I'm like, yep, that's definitely a computer. And another thing to add to that is that they add something to his atomic breath where not only does he shoot it out of his mouth, but the beam varies. Like when it starts, it's actually fire, then it goes into a beam of energy. And then also if he like stops midstream, it'll burst out of his body like in little smaller beams. And it does come across like Godzilla has to get out excess energy, which I like that. Really does sell home the fact he's supposed to be a living, breathing atomic weapon / nuclear reactor. And because of that, it's fitting the way they actually come up with defeating him. It's similar to how they defeated him in the '84 reboot, but different enough. And of course, with how they implement it, does tie in a little bit more to the film's allegorical nature to the 2011 tsunami, mainly when it comes to a certain nuclear reactor melting down because of that crisis, which that's mainly something the Japanese audience will pick up on, but looking at it from IMDb, mentioning it is like, yeah, I can see it. And the bureaucracy thing is because most of the characters in the film are bureaucrats, either people working in the office, politicians themselves. Like, we have 2 different Japanese prime ministers, and there's even some foreign involvement from like the German government. The Chinese and Russian governments are mentioned but never seen. The American government's presence is felt a lot, which makes sense considering we're one of Japan's allies, and given the time there's a lot of UN presence around the world, makes sense that we'd be there. They kind of do joke that the Prime Minister is basically subservient to the United States President. It's like, can I get you some, sir? Can I get you some, sir? Out of the range. I hate that guy. There's a little bit of humor there where, like, a couple times the Prime Minister will talk on the phone with someone from the U.S. and he's like, typical American. I couldn't help but smile a little bit at that. Like, yeah, I could see that. Especially if we're being all belligerent, like, you are going to do this. And to tie in with the whole bureaucracy thing, one of the directors had the actors speak faster than normal to really get out the fact that they're supposed to be bureaucrats, and in my perspective, come across more like they're in a situation like this, like they're thinking out loud quickly. And he did it. He wanted it so much that if they were speaking too slowly during a take, he would cut it. Probably something I would do too in his shoes. And a little interesting thing to note is that some of the Japanese characters actually speak English in the film. Now, it makes sense, of course, when they're talking to the U.S. president, but one of the Japanese actresses plays a character who's supposed to be an American-born, who is there as a liaison. Now, the thing is, her performance varies throughout the film. When she's speaking Japanese, tells it right there. If she's only saying a couple English words, she's okay. When she has to say the English-heavy dialogue part, that's where I don't believe her performance. I'm like this. I don't believe it. It's like, I think it would have been better if they just got a Japanese-American actress who could speak both languages, but English was her first. Or get someone who could play the part in Japan who actually could speak English very fluently and actually come off more as an American, because that's the main problem with her performance, is that when she's speaking English, she doesn't come off like an American. She comes off as a foreigner speaking English. But, you know, I kind of forgive her for the scenes where she's actually speaking her native language, but it sticks out like a sore thumb. I don't know if the Japanese audience had that same problem with it, but me, it really stands out. I can definitely say I could see, like, with other cultures, like, how they feel when American actors will butcher their languages. They're probably like, ugh. But with them, it's probably also typical American. And like I mentioned a little bit ago, the whole thing with nukes. Around the ending of the second act and beginning of the third act, the U.S. is actually ready to nuke Godzilla when he's on Japanese soil. And of course, like with 84, there's that whole tension there, but since the Cold War is no longer active, it doesn't have that same context, but it's still there. And they even mention a couple times it's always post-war Japan. The Prime Minister basically is going to bow to their whims, but they're thinking like, oh, this could be bad. Which is why they come up with the other plan so they don't have to nuke Japan. But if Godzilla ever does come back, I'm not going to spoil the end of the film. Those of you who've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Then they say the United States is going to just basically flip the switch, fire the nuke. Not even having to go through everything else because it's like, oh, Godzilla's back, let's fire. Which is why I'm really interested in seeing the sequel to see if they'll actually do that or if the story will go in a different pattern. Like maybe they'll have a Mechagodzilla or something else for the sequel. You never know. Especially with how that last shot in the film was. Direction-wise, I thought the two directors did a pretty good job. I'm going to have to look at my notes to actually say their names correctly. Hideki Anno, who was involved with a couple of the Evangelion projects, and Shinji Higuchi, who directed both live-action Attack on Titans films. He was involved with the 90s Gamera trilogy as a special effects director, and he also worked in the special effects department on Godzilla 84, which, this is just me throwing this out there, maybe that's why there's a lot of compare and contrast between that reboot and this one from a concept level. Or maybe that's just me making that connection because I noticed these. But he was involved with some of the Godzilla films and some other kaiju films, so throwing him in here, he knows what he's doing. Since they both directed the film, I have a feeling he's the one that focused more on the technical special effects aspect of the film. And it worked. And the cinematography is excellent, especially the scenes involving Godzilla. Like, there's a couple that reminded me of the cinematography on the suit in the original film, the high angles, making him look big. And to add to it, there's a lot of moving shots, some of which kind of make it feel like those shots have a mockumentary type feel, which I think adds to the whole natural disaster aspect of the film, and it's like, oh, I'm sold on this, I'm loving this cinematography. There's even a couple far shots mixed in, which don't make him look as impressive as the close-up ones, but they, there's a nice little contrast there. And in conclusion, this is an excellent film. It's a little soon, but I think I would definitely put Shin Godzilla in my top 10 favorite films of the series, and that would be counting the original film, because that is still my favorite one, at least the Japanese version of it. This one is fighting it for a close second or third, because the Japanese version of King Kong vs. Godzilla is also up in there, and then among other ones. One of these days I'll probably do more talks on my top 10 favorite films in the series, when I probably will go through and watch a bunch of them again, but I'd say this one will definitely be on there. If you are a fan of the Godzilla series and you haven't watched it, go out of your way to watch it. Rent it, buy it. If you want to go down there, stream it somewhere, just watch it and have fun with it. In case anyone's wondering, this does include both the Japanese and English versions. I watched the Japanese version, so I can't speak on how the dub is yet. One of these nights I'll probably watch the dub version, but I'm probably going to stick with the Japanese version if I don't like it that much. I'm just curious how the one American-Japanese character is going to come across in the dub. That's going to be very interesting, I think.